Hey there viewers, welcome back to Ray of All Trades. Next on the bench is a Husqvarna 55. It's the made in Sweden version. This one is in really good shape. Sporting a twin dogs on it. And looks like a what appears to be an 18-inch bar with a 3/8 chain. And looks like a .058 bar. That'd be pretty cool. I haven't seen one of those in a while. Still got the spark arrestor screen in place. Like I said, it's in really good condition. Complaint is that it bogs down whenever he starts getting into cutting wood. So I put about a half tank of fuel in it. Let's fire it up, see if we can duplicate the problem and try to chase it down from that point. See if we get it fired off. Might take a few extra pulls. It was pretty empty of oil. Got a small flathead screwdriver for adjusting if I need to. If we do get it adjusted, I'd like to find out why it went out of adjustment. So we'll choke on, make sure that we are not in the stop position so it runs that direction. Put my foot in here to anchor. Not have a decompression valve on it. It's got a hole for it. It doesn't have one. It's got a lot of compression now. Let's go half choke. Sounds like she's running a little bit fast. Let's get a tack on there. Okay, so the RPMs are definitely too high. This one is reading for a 2-cylinder, so it's basically doubling my readings. But if you took 27,000 and divided it in half, it would be roughly 13.5. And it seemed like it was still trying to climb. What I noticed is when I tried to fatten up, that's how you adjust the RPMs on these. So on the high screw, you would adjust it, fatten it up to lower it, and then the the more lean it out, you would actually tighten it in, and that would bring the RPMs back up. So I think what's occurring here is that the saw is attempting to run too lean, which would explain when he was trying to cut. It sounds great right now. Put it under load, but if it got hot, it would start to burn the saw up. So it definitely is running too lean. So we need to fatten it up a little bit. It could be from seals leaking. Could be several other things. So my next step, I'm going to try to spray some brake cleaner around this while it's idling, see if we have any evident leaks that show up. If I can find that, the easiest way to fix this, I can pull these plugs, the limiting plugs, and I can fatten it up. The question is, am I band-aiding something? And the answer is probably yes. It was running great before, otherwise it's not running great now. So I'm going to try to spray some, like I said, brake cleaner around the base of the cylinder, the carburetor, the intake itself, the intake boot back behind here, and then try to reach these seals in here if I can. So one's behind the flywheel, very difficult to tell, but generally spraying around this area without getting it into the air filter will usually yield a little bit different RPM, and then you can start to dial in what's going on there. So let's get some brake cleaner. Let's get fired back up. Safety glasses are a must. There's a lot of air and stuff coming up, and it'll spray this stuff out in your eyes. Yep, I've got an intake leak here. That immediately shut the engine off. Yep, so we've got an intake leak right here where this carburetor meets. So most likely it's the base gasket of the carburetor, or it also could be the carburetor itself. The throttle on it may have too big of an opening on that throttle where the shaft goes through the carburetor, opening and closing the throttle. That should not have stalled out like that. So anyway, that's what we're going to chase after. So let's get this taken apart, see what's going on. Most likely we're going to throw a carburetor kit on this and seal up everything, clean it up, see if the problem goes away, and go from there. So the Achilles heel of these saws was this plastic intake. That's what did most of these saws in. So if you're going to work on one of these, always use hand tools and don't over torque stuff. Allen wrench, 4mm. Loosen these up. Pay attention to how tight they were, because you really don't want to go beyond that. This base screw goes into a magnesium case, but the rest of it goes into plastic. And finding these parts OEM is a struggle. Looks like a factory Zama carb. Pull this throttle linkage out and just set it down. And let's get the choke lever out. Set it down. So it came off of here pretty easy. It's got liquid in there, and this gasket is extremely wet. So I think that this gasket is probably our culprit. Yeah, it's got a lot of dirt both sides. Most likely that's our problem. is this seal to the carburetor, and probably rebuild the carburetor. Fuel line doesn't feel too bad, but the second most common problem I've seen on these is the intake boot. It goes from the cylinder to this plate that I'm taking off right now. Coil wire up out the way, ignition kill wire up out the way. Be very careful taking this off and putting this back on, very fragile. This right here is your intake boot. There should be a screw. There it is. Right down there. Let's see if you guys can see it. There should be a screw right there. Let's pull that out. Right there. And then this has two barbs on it. Just lift those out of the holder and we should be able to pull this intake off. So I'm just wiggling it back and forth off of this rubber boot that I was just talking about. So on the back side here we have an impulse jet. This right here will line up with a rubber boot at the bottom of the cylinder, and then the intake boot lines up on this. They have a habit of getting stiff over time, not sealing up properly. So if you don't have a replacement boot, I have been able to use some 1184 and seal these up. But no matter what, let's get it cleaned up really good. And this actually seems to be pretty decent shape. Anyway, let's get it cleaned up really good. Talk about putting this thing back together. First thing I'm going to do is vacuum all this out of here though. Okay, so the reason I was using a vacuum versus using a compressed air is because right now the bottom of the cylinder is open. If I wasn't confident or I thought I got debris in there, you'd want to make sure that it was completely out. And if necessary, you would pull off the 4 base bolts. Again, I believe that was a T... I think it actually might be a T5 on those. Excuse me, a 5mm, not T5, 5mm Allen. Pull those off. You want to reseal the base gasket and make sure that you don't occlude this port down here, which is your impulse line hole. So, like I said, these parts for these are getting a little bit more scarce to find. So, one of the tricks I like to do is put a little bit of 1184 on this cone right here, so as this gets pushed in, it makes a seal down here. And then I also try to take a little bit of 1184 right here on the edge, so when this goes on, it makes a seal down here, and then also a little bit of 1184 up here, so that it seals up around that side, so around this part, so it seals up around there, and just basically gets rid of any kind of vacuum leaks. And then when you put that on, expect that it's going to be on there for a while. So I'm going to take this part away from the saw and try to clean this up a little bit more with some compressed air and get some 1184 ready so that we can seal all this up. 1184, also known as 3 Bond, Yama Bond, Honda Bond, goes by a bunch of different names. It is a sealer that is made for gasoline. It won't dissolve under gasoline. Works really well, stays pliable a really long time, and just be very, very cautious with it and use sparingly, only enough that's necessary. So like I said, I'm going to put a little bit around the mouth of here, and as that gasket goes on, it's going to push it the rest of the way on and make it seal up here. This intake, slide it on, just mash it flat. Make sure that nothing popped up in the middle there. So now on this part, alright, so I've already cleaned all these areas with a brake clean just to make sure it adheres real well. Just want a really thin coat, about 1/8 of an inch back. Nope, that didn't work. Alright. About 1/8 of an inch back, just to make sure that it doesn't get in the way of the impulse line. This impulse line is what drives your fuel diaphragm on your carburetor. And let's just put it right around here. You can almost see where that gasket was. You have to work to get it between that little small area right there, but you don't want to miss it, because that will cause a leak. Clean that area up. Make sure this rod's out of the way. You want to push this out to the outside so that you can squeeze this in here, and watch that I get the impulse line and the breather, excuse me, the intake boot, all in place all at one time without getting a bunch of dirt on it. There we go. So I made sure that the intake went in properly. Let's go ahead and anchor this in place while everything's still wet, has an opportunity to dry in the right area. Let's put this air injection snorkel back up in place. That's the air injection portion of it. This fan is pushing air up here, blows air out here, and that's what keeps your air filter cleaner longer on these saws. Awesome saws, love them. Actually own a few myself, and all my friends own them. Workhorses. No need to gap the coil. I just cleaned it up. I mean, you guys saw how well it ran. So all that's in good shape. Alright, let's look at the carburetor. I'm fairly confident we've already found the problem. I'm pretty sure, looking at all the debris that was on both sides of that gasket, I think it was already, somebody already had it open and just didn't tighten it up all the way, or clean it up all the way. See, I pulled a vacuum on here. There we go. Loosen up the gas cap, that should stop that fuel from running. A lot of dirt on that side, on the breather side. Not a lot on this side. She ran really good. I would like to, the gaskets all feel really good. So I'm just going to clean it, put it back together, and worry about sealing that. Let's talk about carburetors real quick. So fuel comes in the carburetor right here, comes into that jet right there, or into that hole, comes out, and that is on the reed valve side. The fuel gets pulled up through that filter. That filter right there, there's a screen that you can pull out and clean. It's through that filter right there, up into this side of the carburetor. Comes up through that needle. The needle's right here. What drives this up and down is the air hitting this diaphragm here and making this act as a fuel pump. That air that comes up and drives that up and down is coming from the impulse line that we talked about earlier. That needed to be cleaned, and then it's also coming through this part of the carburetor right here. Anyhow, so that's basically your fuel pump. They also call it a metering diaphragm, because the pulsing is making that fuel allowed to come through that jet metered. So while I was doing that, I got a little dirt in here. Let me clean that up too. This looks fairly clean. Go ahead and put it back up. What you're looking for, if the reed valves are stuck in one place, or there's dirt, like this one had a lot of dirt in it. I did not expect to be using the carbon choke cleaner, otherwise I would have grabbed a set of rubber gloves. And everybody who tells me that I should have had them on, you were right, I should have had them on. So, I'll make sure that's clean, working like it's supposed to, basically working like it has the ability of pumping up and down. So keyway holds that in place. I like to get these fairly snug. This especially on a used gasket. These are your limiting plugs, so when you adjust them, they're made to only give you so much travel. When the saws start to get old, you just grab these with a pair of pliers and pull them off, and then you can adjust it to ear. I really think that this saw, once we fix the problem, will actually work, and that if it doesn't, that's when I'll pull these plugs off. If I don't lose any more fuel, I'm going to go ahead and put this fuel line back on the carburetor. Get that out of there. What do I want to do about this? At a minimum, I know I want to clean it. I don't think I have one of those gaskets in stock. I'm considering just making one real fast. I keep gasket material on hand to be able to make those. Let's make sure that there's no threads hanging out. I think that's where the biggest problem comes into play on these. When somebody takes it apart, it pulls those threads out of here, and it holds that gasket from, or the carburetor from fully seating down there. So you can kind of see it sticking out there. Get a little razor blade and trim those up. So on the carburetor, see that hole right there? That's the impulse line hole. That lines up with that hole in the gasket, which lines up with this slot opening. The air comes out of here, works its way across that channel, and then through that hole. I want to be able to seal all that up without putting excessive torque on this plastic screws. I think what I'm going to do is, again, resort back to the 1184 and put the thinnest possible coat that I can across it. I'll put it on my fingers and just try to smear it across. What I'm worried about is that that hole will get occluded if I have too much material in there. I'm really worried about that hole getting occluded. So I want to be extremely cautious around that. The right thing to do here is to replace the gasket. The OEM gasket is a fantastic condition gasket, or excuse me, it's a fantastic gasket. The replacements are similar to the type that I make, that most people make. They're okay. They're not quite as thick. And, so you see I've got a giant glob on there right now. Let's see if I can get majority of that pulled off of there. And just gasket up both sides of this thing. It's just the original gaskets were just, on these, were really good. The aftermarket's not so much. Okay, that's a pretty thin layer on there. Very humid day, so this stuff is tacking up really quick. So on this one, the choke lever Goes in just like that. Comes up that direction. Screw holes go through there. And there. The choke lever drops up into that groove right there, like that, and then I'm going to be putting the fuel line through there. Throttle linkage is supposed to go right there, just like that. Drop it down into this keeper here, down that groove. Fuel line up in this snap down here. Choke lever up in here. Get these started. Make sure everything works before we go crazy tightening everything up. Throttle works, choke works, throttle releases it. Okay. I'm just going to take my time gently going back and forth, feeling for that sweet spot. I like the feel of those. Okay, now I'm going to anchor it down. I'm hoping this is my last time in this saw. Let's get the kill switch back on. Fuel line's not in the way. It's underneath that kill switch so that no sharp edges are hitting it. This sets down inside a groove. It has a key right there. And it drops into basically into a groove, right? So I drop this in there, just like that. Spark plug wire does the same thing. Goes into a groove right there. Snaps up in there. Both of them come through here. Go ahead and put that boot on it to help hold things in place. Let's put this air filter on real quick, and I'm gonna blow out some of that dust and debris while we have it apart. So those covers ever won't go on, just give that rope a quick tug. It'll line up the dogs and put it back in place. I've already warmed it up a little bit. like the RPMs. They're sitting right at about 13. Sounded, if anything, it might be just a touch high, but it's all the way at maximum richness on the high jet without pulling the plugs. Let's see how it does in the cut. We'll call that a win. As always, guys, I appreciate you hanging out with me for the day. If you got anything out of the video, a thumbs up and a subscribe always helps the channel. Let you guys know whenever I post new content. See you soon.